Hi, welcome to MamaFuel. My name is Anne Ferguson. I am your host, and I'm thrilled to bring you this podcast that was created to fuel every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully spark a dream or two along the way. My mission is to change the way that we mamas treat ourselves and each other so that we feel better, live happier lives, and change the world one happier family at a time. In the MamaFuel podcast, I'm sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with amazing mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of being a gorgeous woman shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. You are amazing, and I cannot wait to share this conversation with you. Let's get started. Hello there. I am so looking forward to sharing this week's conversation with you, like I do every week, but particularly because this week I'm having a conversation with the amazing Claire Farrington, who has become a voice and activist for people with Down syndrome following the birth of her first son, Theo, who was born really prematurely, and they very quickly discovered with an extra chromosome. So he has Down syndrome and is now a 3.5-year-old, I believe, strapping little guy and in wonderful health. And on the day of our interview, Claire was counting down the hours to have her C-section and meet her second little guy, Freddie. I am happy to report that Freddie was born without incident, that Claire and Freddie and Theo and the boy's dad are doing really well, and that everyone is getting used to what it's like to being a family of 4. I'm super grateful to Claire for coming and talking to me about the experience of having this terrifying, way too early birth, and then discovering that her son had a condition or a chromosome that meant that things were going to be different from the fantasy that she had. Claire also readily admits that she knew very little about Down syndrome and had a bit of a catastrophizing perspective of what the Down syndrome diagnosis would mean to her son Theo and to their family. And she will be the first to tell you that having Theo exactly, perfectly as he is has been one of, if not the greatest gift in her life. If nothing else, I hope this conversation will prompt conversations between you and people that you know, maybe your kids, maybe friends, family, neighbors, and a different understanding of what it's like to be the parent of a differently gifted child, because her little guy, Theo, is definitely gifted in many ways and has been one of the greatest gifts in her life. So Claire, thank you, if you're listening, for coming on and sharing your story. Congratulations on the effortless, I was going to say, but that got stuck in my mouth. It wasn't effortless. Uneventful birth of Freddie, and I'm just really thrilled that everyone in your end of the world is getting to know your little guy and what it's like to be a family of 4. I also wanted to say before we get started that a lot of us forget ourselves, or we forget our self-care. We forget to be kind to ourselves, and it becomes so habitual to push ourselves out to the fringes or out to the edges or the bottom of the list that we just don't ever get around to doing the things that we need to do for ourselves. So I am hosting a 5-day self-care practice run where we will be gathering online for 5 days, totally free, to practice, test some stuff out, and see what works for you in the self-love realm. We can go a million different directions, but everywhere that we go is going to be supremely nurturing, super loving, and wildly kind to you. And I cannot wait for you to join. The only way for you to do that right now is to email me at Anne, at mamafuel.me, or look me up, mamafuel.me on Instagram and Facebook, and message me there, and I will get you all set up so that you can join our free self-love practice run starting on the 17th of June. Without any further ado, get ready to meet Claire. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. I'm Anne Ferguson, your host, and this week I'm joined by somebody I just met 2.3 seconds ago, completely by chance, at a week ago at time of recording. You'll have heard me say for the last few podcasts, or a few podcasts ago, that it was Global Maternal Mental Health Week. And Claire Farrington and I connected over something that someone else said over on a post. It was actually Anna Whitehouse. Yeah, it was Anna Whitehouse, as you do. And we were talking about work and flexible work. That's how we connected, in fact. And Claire had made a comment about an experience that she had had recently with her employer, and my jaw hit the floor, and I decided to respond. And very quickly, we started chatting, and I found out Claire's journey into motherhood and thought, oh, this conversation needs to be recorded. So Claire, I am so grateful to you for agreeing completely at the spur of a very busy moment in your life to have this conversation with me. Welcome to MamaFuel.
Thank you so much for having me, and I should say us as well. Shortly to become a family of 4 tomorrow. So, yeah.
So when I say busy, we're talking less than 24 hours until your 3 becomes 4. So for anyone who's not watching the YouTube video, Claire is delightfully, beautifully round in all the perfect ways that you can be at the end of pregnancy. She's gorgeous.
Swollen feet, no makeup, frizzy hair, but that's what you got to deal with, isn't it? You know.
Gorgeous. We're not doing makeup tips. So
we're not. We're just so grateful that there's something in there. So very grateful.
Yeah. So let's start with you telling us what your life looks like right now. Just give us a snapshot so that we can all get a sense of where you're coming from as you're talking to us today.
Sure. Okay. So I live with my partner, Andy, in North London. I met Andy 5 years ago. He was 24 and I was 37, and I never thought it would go anywhere because of the age gap, but he is a lovely guy, and we got together. Things progressed fairly quickly because obviously I did want children, so we got pregnant when I was 38, and we weren't even trying, but of course we felt very lucky that we'd even gotten there, and everything was fine. I'll tell that story a little bit later. We moved into a house last summer in North London, which is just felt so lucky because it's so bloody expensive in this city. And I am 37 weeks pregnant with our second child. So I have a son called Theo. I was born at 29 weeks with a diagnosis of Down syndrome postnatally, and then I'm now pregnant with his little brother after 3 very early miscarriages. So very, very, very lucky, very nervous. And I've just finished work, which is how we started chatting. I'm still working on my maternity leave. Because that's the way it is. You work right up to the last minute because you don't get a lot with some companies in this country. I don't know how women do it. It feels very punitive to be pregnant at all. Mm. But somehow I'm going to try and take 9 months off because I need this experience to plaster over the first experience, because that was a very different. So at the beginning of my maternity leave, about to hopefully have a baby in a smooth and easy way tomorrow, I hope. And that's where we're at. We're on the brink of changing our family. And that brings up a whole load of things that you don't think, you want this second baby so much. And then you feel guilt towards the first, particularly if your first has special needs. And you just think, oh my God, how am I going to cope? Because you just don't know, do you? It's a funny precipice to be on. That's what it feels. And you know that you'll remember being on both sides for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. It's a big old moment tomorrow.
I did an interview with Sarah Tucker, who was one of the contestants on The Voice UK this year, and we spoke a few weeks ago, and she was talking about when she was pregnant with Joshua, and she had Sienna. I think there's a 2-year difference between the two of them, and she said she remembered standing on top above Sienna's cot the night before they were due to have Joshua, and just weeping over her daughter's cot and saying to her husband, she has no idea what's about to happen to her. She has no idea. And it's that feeling of you feel this responsibility towards your first child, and you don't want to take away any of the attention that they've got, and you don't yet understand, because you haven't lived it, the richness of what a sibling will bring to them, because in that moment, all you can see is what you're losing, and you've got the fear blended in.
That's right.
And then the guilt of, how can I be feeling this way about the new baby? But look at this one. It's that going from 1 to 2, I think I hear parents of multiple saying the biggest step wasn't from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4. It was from 1 to 2. Mm-hmm. And then 2 to 3. But then after that, it's,
I don't think I'll be going that far.
This is growing the team, just growing the team. So tell us, you alluded a little bit to your journey into motherhood. So you were 37 when you met your husband and you knew, or your partner, and you knew that you wanted to have a child, and everything was rosy until it wasn't.
That's right. So I got pregnant by accident. We weren't even really trying, which, you know, in itself is an absolute joy because it's a lovely surprise. And everything seemingly was going well. Lots of people did say I was carrying fairly small, but when it's your first time, you don't really, you know, compare it to. So it got up to about 29 weeks. And I went to see my midwife, standard appointment. She measured my bump and said, oh, it's a bit small, but I'm sure everything's fine. I mean, I was what we class as a geriatric mother. No one had really paid much attention to that. Then she said, well, you should probably go for a scan. I'll get you into a scan tomorrow. That tomorrow was the Friday. So I saw my midwife on the Thursday. If the hospital hadn't fit me in on that Friday and the scan was on the Monday, Theo would probably not be here, or he would be severely brain damaged. I was described myself in a recent blog post as a ticking time bomb that no one knew about. So went for the scan on the Friday lunchtime, thought, oh, wait, I'll be back in work by Friday afternoon. And they all went deathly quiet and said something about Doppler flow, which now, you know, I know exactly what that is. He had been deprived of oxygen and nutrients inside me for about a month. He was the size of a baby, and they had to get him out. It was awful. It was traumatic. It was so frightening. But what can you do? But you just have to sink in and go with it and trust the medical professionals. So we had a baby born the size of, you know, an iPhone 7 with legs and arms. His hand used to be the size of my fingernail. That's the first picture that was ever taken of us together. It was traumatic. I don't know how we did it, but you know, I suppose when you see your baby in an incubator with all the wires and all the doctors, you kind of know that if something is going to happen, they're going to pounce on it. Whereas, and it's weird, I feel that for this baby, you can't see what's happening inside of here. They can only scan and do the CTGs. But an incubator, I got my head around it. It was kind of like a very safe place. It was certainly safer than my womb. So, but 3 weeks into all of this, you just get used to a new level of stress. You cope, because that's the only thing you can do. They sat us down and told us that a blood test result had come back that was life-changing, not life-threatening. And for the life of me, I couldn't think what it was. I thought, what has he got? Has he got? I mean, I never thought Down syndrome. Not once. Then when they said it, because I didn't know anything about it, and because the NHS tests for it, and it's called the Downs test, and it's all, whole language around it is fairly negative. And I don't know where I'd got my preconceptions from, but they weren't up to date. When I heard those words, I was like, bang, life's over. Never going to be happy again. I don't want this child. I never asked for this. It's very, very upsetting.
And shocking too, because we had said, you know, before you started talking, we had said that, you know, it's a shocking beginning, and it's a beginning like way before it's supposed to happen, right? Because he was born so soon.
And we were dealing with that as well. And I feel so sad that myself and other mothers would just write a child off, potentially if you have a prenatal diagnosis, just on 2 words. Sorry, I am a bit emotional.
It's okay. You're about to have a baby in less than 24 hours, so it's okay.
Sad that, you know, there's not enough that's known about it. And I was one of those people, because I was actually angry. I was angry that the NHS had missed it, and that, you know, my son was born with a condition that I didn't want. And now I'm so grateful that I didn't know, because we were talking about this earlier, you just don't know. Diagnosis or not, you don't know. You just don't know. A stranger to you, and they will teach you so much. And Theo absolutely has. And, you know, I'd watched him survive for 3 weeks. So I'm not saying that I didn't want him. It just took many, many months to get my head around it. And I discovered other people's blogs, which was really helpful. I started writing my own mum on a different path. I couldn't find a blog that wrote about it in the eye of the storm. A lot of these mothers had sort of written about their journey 2 or 3 years in. I wanted to record how I felt at that time because I knew it would change. I thought that was very important to people who were going to go through the same thing as me, because you just do go through like this dreadful rainbow of emotions. It's like it takes you by surprise. You love your son so much, you love your baby, but what's the future going to be like? And you get this and your mind just jumps to the future. Whereas if you, which I hope will happen tomorrow, I'll get handed my baby and I'll go home and I'll just enjoy my baby. I won't be thinking, am I going to be able to get him into the local school? Is he going to get married? Is he going to be lonely for the rest of his life? How are people going to accept him? I'm not going to be thinking any of that stuff. But because you have a diagnosis and you don't know anything about that life, you start putting so much onto that little being, and it's just a little being. So I had to do quite myself, and I was offered counselling, and once we had gotten him home after 3.5 months, a long time in hospital, and I'm not having this baby in the same hospital, thank goodness, because those corridors are, they are soaked with memories. So completely different hospital, and hopefully bringing my baby home after 48 hours, not all that time. Once I brought him home and I just became a mum, it all started to heal fairly quickly. Someone said to me that will be the solution where they were the obvious, not problem's the wrong word, but it absolutely Theo was. I think there's quite a few advantages with having a premature baby. I brought home a baby that was fed every 4 hours, was like clockwork, who slept through the night at 5-6 months. He was as good as gold. He's a very good little boy, actually. And, my motherhood journey was, once we'd gotten him home, was quite easy, thank God. I know that there's other mothers out there with children with a condition that, might have feeding problems or sleeping problems or breathing problems. We were so lucky. We had none of that. So, Theo's given us quite an easy ride, and he's taught us, my God, wow. I come from a background of such deep gratitude that I'm so glad I have, and that is applied to this baby as well. If this baby's going to keep me up for months and months, and I might have a couple of nights where I'm going, oh, but the background will be, thank God that I'm even experiencing that, and Theo could be naughty sometimes and play me up, and I just think, good for you, mate. Good for you. He threw his bloody yogurt all across the room this morning, and I did get a little bit cross, I have to say, but part of me was just like, oh well, at least I'm here clearing up your yogurt. It's like I have like a sliding doors mentality on it all because of nearly losing him. And if I'd found out about him, and I've always been honest about this, I probably would have aborted him, and that is something that I have to live with in my head every day. And I'm just, wow, that's a big old thing to carry around, And there's so many mothers out there, particularly we're just about to have new tests coming into NHS England where they're more accurate than the ones that I took. And I know you read my blog post. I did take this test with this baby, and it did feel conflicting because I was testing for something that we already have in our family, but I don't want it again. One is enough. And all these mothers, they were telling me when I went into the clinic, this test does not just test for Downs, it tests for, I think, Patau syndrome, Edwards syndrome, and Down syndrome. They're all terrified of. So sadly, it's Down syndrome. And all these people from any age are coming in to test for it, to make sure that they don't have it. And, we have all these medical advantages, but the context and the conversations around that are not catching up. So there is still this big fear about it. But people like my son, little boys like my son, are nothing to fear. And, in this country, he's just been awarded an MBE. He's got Down syndrome. And you just think, wow, what an amazing achievement. How proud is that mother going to be? Because we all know how a little bit more difficult it would have been for Sarah Gordy to have achieved that. That's just, she blows my mind, that woman. You just think, wow, you're like probably one of the best people walking around on this planet right now. And I want my son is in that community, and I think he's a great ambassador. You go to a restaurant, you're not the anonymous family. You're not. Everyone will look. Less so in London, but you come outside and people look. But people just, what I hope they see is they just see a lovely little boy with his very happy family. And that is all there is to see. Yes, okay, I don't have, conversations with my 3-year-old, which I hope one day when I do. That's the thing I long for the most, is to him in that way, to answer his questions. I can't wait, and I hope that will come. He has about 6 or 7 words and 60 signs, but he has quite bad glue ear that does interfere with his hearing, and of course he has a learning difficulty. So, but he'll get there.
Yeah, there's so much to unpick from your really kind explanation of your entry into motherhood, and you've skipped lots of it. So anybody who wants to hear about that can go to your blog, Mom on a Different Path, and I'll link to that in the show notes as well as your Instagram account, which is lovely. But as you were talking, it made me think of something that we've been talking about recently in the MamaFuel Sisterhood, which is a membership that I run, bringing together mums who are feeling isolated or alone or guilty or ashamed because mumming is hard sometimes. It's not what we see in the magazines and the adverts, and it's not what on some level, it's not what we're sold, right? And so there's this.
That's a big problem with a parent who goes through a different experience like me. But when you don't see that sold version, and you're miles away from it, you're like, but that's what I was expecting.
Yeah, I signed up for that. Yes, actually, I'm having this, and I don't want this. What I want is that. So give me that, and make this go away, and not make my child go away, but make this nightmare of my child the size of an iPhone 7. Thank goodness, with all of his pieces intact, right? And an extra, he got a bonus chromosome, and that means something in his development and in your lives and in the forward planning that you will do as his parents for him later in life. And I mean, but it's that jarring mismatch between fantasy that you imagine, and even hearing you talk about the birth tomorrow, like we think we have control. We think we know. We think, especially those of us who have on some level been like hardworking, high achieving, driving personalities with, be it career or artists or whatever, who have felt some degree of agency over our path or our evolution. And if we don't like it, well, then we leave and we do something else. And we think we have control, and actually we don't. And none of us do, male or female. And we really, really don't. And least of all, when the swimmers and the egg get together and do whatever chemical magic they decide to do between them, because we don't know. We don't know the state and quality of what's coming together. We don't know how they're dancing, how they're fizzing. Maybe the swimmers have a hiccup. I mean, we have no idea. And then we're handed a situation, and it literally takes the brain time to adjust. And there's some level, I think, amongst all parents who are met with a situation that they're not expecting. And it can be something that seems as innocuous as a learning difference. My oldest daughter was my podcast guest a few months ago. She's now 11, and she has dyslexia. And it took until she was 8 until we finally were able to get someone to say, yeah, the reason it's so hard is this. And also there are other learning differences. And also this has this consequence. And also now there's trauma. And I had this sense of, what do you mean? My brain was just going, does not compute, because I couldn't grasp that this brilliant being, perfect in all the ways I see as her mother. I mean, yeah, she's flawed just like we all are, was suddenly facing something that I had no knowledge of, other than, yes, dyslexic people write their letters backwards, maybe sometimes, but like you with Down syndrome, I didn't know. And then you suddenly,
when it's not your world, you don't listen to it, do you? That's the thing.
And it's such a shame, because becoming educated, there's a woman who I connected to you actually through a comment on Instagram.
Yes, I saw.
Did you see?
Yeah.
And she is the most exquisite photographer. She has an account called
An exquisite place.
She lives in an exquisite place. Our Life in the Woods. They live in Germany, and they're taking 4 or 6 months to travel with their family, and they have 2 daughters, who I'm going to guess are 4 and 7-ish, or 6 and 8. And this little boy who was born with Down syndrome, and they didn't know either before he came along. And he's had a health journey of being born at full term and having respiratory challenges, which apparently are quite frequent amongst Down syndrome babies. But see, being exposed to her journey in its very infancy, with her son's infancy, has really kind of made me go, okay. And I remember watching TV shows when I was a kid. I want to say it was it Dawson's Creek? I think it was Dawson's Creek, if I'm not mistaken. Did you ever watch that show?
No, I didn't.
So I believe, and if you're listening to this and you know more than you know what I'm talking about, I believe it was Dawson's Creek, and this family there was a son with Down syndrome, and so he was a teenager, so it was adolescence with this boy with Down syndrome who was able to speak and going to school, and eventually got a girlfriend. And well, what does that mean? And how do you move in together? And it was a really beautiful, now to be fair, in the 90s American television program. So take it with the pinches of salt that you will. But that was kind of, as a young adult, my very first introduction to what it might be like to have someone with a difference. And
I had none. That was you, at least you'd seen it. So good for Dawson's Creek. I hadn't seen it. I hadn't met. Was just not. I don't, like I said to you earlier, I just don't know where on earth I got all my. When they said Down syndrome, I had an image of an older man rocking in a chair, like alone, awful. Just when
non-communicative.
Yeah, awful.
And it's so not true.
No, it's so not true. Yes, she's a couple of years behind me, and I'm sure she'll do like I did, that your baby just, yes, they develop at a not so quick a pace, but there's a pleasure in that as well. I really savoured every single moment with Theo. Yes, because the background of nearly losing him as well, but it's the same at this stage as well. I'm a bit like, I'm not going to be able to he's very cuddly and do all the things that I'm used to doing with him, because of course my attention will be diverted. But I have had, I suppose, this lovely, lovely journey, this lovely slow slide into, what it's all about, and everything that I signed up for as a parent, everything that I signed up for, that child's given me. Yes, we have to take him to hospital. Yes, we have to do his appointments. Yes, we have to take him to stuff, but he gives us all of what we wanted and more. And I think I love him more because of his Down syndrome. Because, I suppose he is a little bit vulnerable, and I might worry about him a little bit more. But he teaches me stuff. I now know Makaton signing. I didn't know that before. I now know endless patience. I now know so much. I mean, yes, I would have learned that anyway, but there is a different sheen. I talk about it quite a lot in my writing. I've alluded to it being like another colour under the rainbow that you would only see if you're the parent of a special needs child. And that is what it feels like.
That's really beautiful. And I actually wrote down, I was telling you before we started, that in one of your blogs you had written that no one can tell you at the beginning that the amount of patience you have to have is from a source you never thought you possessed. And I read that and it really stopped me in my tracks, because I think that's probably on some level true of any parent who wants
absolutely.
to do a good job as a parent, like who wants to be present and listening and attentive and available. I think on some level we all have a degree of that. But yes, when there is a difference or an illness or I have some friends who have had kids who've been battling cancer, and kids who, all kinds of different situations, right? Grief through one of the parents passing away, and the depth that you need to dig into must be I mean, I know what the depth that we've had to dig for dyslexia, which is not a life-altering, well, it can be, but in our case, Caroline is extremely well supported, and she's surrounded and has learning support, and is great. But to have a situation where you have a sense of a greater vulnerability for your child has made you an advocate in a way that perhaps you weren't before. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because as much as you and your partner are journeying as parents to Theo, and finally brought him home, and finally started doing the things that you were dreaming of, and finally had your baby, and finally all of those things, and now you're having a second baby, and you're, filling up the team, and you'll be doing the two child juggle, and at the same time, it sounds to me, from the little that I've been able to learn about you in the last week, as we've both been galloping along, is that you have also suddenly taken on this role of being advocates, and not just advocates for him individually in challenging contexts like childcare that's not delivering what it should be, or looking at schooling eventually, or being in the playground and having kids say something that might hurt him, or, and then there's the greater advocacy of, we need to change the conversation in the UK, and we're here. Like, let's talk about it. So can you talk about your journey into becoming an unsuspecting advocate?
I think I was definitely unsuspecting, because at the beginning, I'd got into hospital, no one really knew about it, and you think, then we get the diagnosis, and you think, right, I'm now going to have to come out and tell all my friends that my son has Down syndrome. And I'll admit to you, I was a bit, you want to tell anyone? And at the beginning, you couldn't really see it either. He has quite mild facial features anyway, and I found it quite difficult when people started to see it. So it took me, I didn't become an advocate until I started to accept it, obviously. And then I'd read and had taken inspiration from so many other parents. And my advocacy came with knowing that actually life is that much different. And all the preconceptions that I had were very unfair, actually. And if I needed to change those, and I consider myself a fairly educated, fair person, then many people would need to change how they thought about it as well. And then you start, you're the only mother in the mother and baby group with a child with Down syndrome. That was difficult. But then you realise that you are in a little bit of a minority. And being in a minority, you must shout and tell people. And, people would ask me questions. I still get it now. Did you know? No, I didn't know. And you can't, I don't get cross with people. My sister does. She's like, how dare people ask you that? She's an advocate for my son as well. But people don't know. And I think if you're enough to ask you, then you must tell them. And you have a responsibility to tell people that, yes, this is how I came to this journey, but this is what the journey is like. And it's not what I thought, and it's not what you probably think it is, and it's not what the NHS pages tell you it is either. There's so much of it that is untold. Like I said, I get so much that I signed up for being a parent. So the blog, Mum on a Different Path. Then World Down Syndrome Day is March the 21st, so the third month of the year, because it's a third copy of the 21st chromosome. And every year, I work in PR anyway, I will pitch our story, because there's a story to tell at every stage. That's the big thing for me. I only really know Down syndrome up to 3 years old. I don't know what it's like at 10 or 16. But the more I suppose I write and I hear more, maybe magazines are in, or TV or whatever it is, the more there's a record left behind for anyone else. So with all these mothers that are getting a prenatal diagnosis, which there are more of because of these tests, hopefully they'll find us and someone else like us and be able to see what life is like. Because when you have a diagnosis, it wipes out, the black curtain comes down, and you're like, okay, I don't know anything about this life. That void is fear and there's so many black emotions that actually, if you filled that void with information, if you saw a blog or a whatever it is, read a podcast, saw some pictures, you're going to start to give yourself a context. So that's why I feel that that's very much my responsibility, because I was searching for that context as well. And I found a few, and there's so many of us mothers now, so many of us, all on Instagram, that are shouting about it all, going, look, it's not that bad, but we are shouting to the converted. I'm only following them, and they're only following me because we have a shared context. But Lucy, who's 22 out there, who might get a diagnosis in 6 years' time, will only find us when she's going to find us. She's not going to listen to us now. That's why we're going to magazine in July, which is great. That's why if you get into get into mainstream media, it's kind of like the only way, unfortunately, because otherwise no one's going to really listen unless you have to. Why would you? I wouldn't be following a mum with a kid with Down syndrome if I didn't have a kid with Down syndrome, I suspect. So that's, you've got to wall, I think, because I worry that we are heading into a time of eugenics when, we are, it's almost like we want, as expectant parents, a little handbook to come along with our unborn baby and go, right, they're going to be like this. This is going to be their eye colour. It's going to be and it's like we talked about before. It's just not. It's not fair. You kind of get what you're given. And of course, I believe in choice. Of course, I'm not. But my big thing for advocacy is make the choice based on a choice. Yeah. Because I think there's so many parents that just think there's one choice because they read the NHS pages and they go, "Don't want that. No way." Don't want all those health issues, and there is a spectrum, and we're extremely lucky. Theo he hasn't had many of the health problems. He wasn't born with a heart condition. He's a good kid. We're lucky. We are lucky. But even if he wasn't, it wouldn't make us love him any less. No, for sure. You just get on with it. Yeah. But there's. That language needs to change around it. You have a 1 in something risk of having a child with Down syndrome. It needs to be changed to chance. Yeah. The NHS need to work with parents like myself, and I do talks for the NHS on my parent experience. Sort of give a diagnosis. My diagnosis was given quite well, actually. I don't have any complaints about that. But it's about the information that parents are given when they're given a diagnosis. Don't just give them the medical facts. Give them links to all these blogs, pictures, make it just make a magazine of it or something. It's not this thing, it's not this bleak existence. It really is not.
You were saying, make a choice based on a choice. And I heard you at the beginning when you were feeling emotional about that you felt so guilty that if you had known that you might have ended the pregnancy because of the very very little information that you had at the time. And it just puts me in mind of something that I often say to the mamas that I work with, which is, who are expressing guilt or shame or anguish around decisions that they had made in the past or things that they did. And we all make the best decision we can with the information we have at the time. It is not your fault that at 37, 38, you hadn't done a thesis on Down syndrome because it wasn't an area of interest to you, but you have done other things. And so now, like us, we didn't even know that there was dyslexia in my husband's family. And it transpired when we started asking questions, because it's hereditary, that this person has it and suffered this, and this person had it. And then you're like, whoa, you think, even just in your family, the things that people experience. And then when you start to scratch a little bit, you think you might, unearth a tiny little thing, and what you unearth is this immense chasm of oh my goodness, how did I not even know that this was the experience? And so as you build on your knowledge and you start to weave a tapestry that looks like you and looks like Theo and has the texture of the sounds he makes and the delight he has when he sees something exciting, and the yogurt that he whips across the floor, and you think, good on you, mate, because you've got an arm, I mean, whatever it is, the pieces, the threads that you start to weave together into your experience with your exquisite boy in the way that he is in the world right now and will be evolving, then you I think what I want to give to you is you applying that knowledge, taking all of that knowledge, looking back and saying, I would have made the wrong choice, but you didn't have this beautiful tapestry yet.
No,
right?
I didn't.
And I think it's really beautiful what you're doing, which is giving other parents an opportunity to hear a different voice and to see a different reality, and to maybe open what feel like very tightly closed doors to possibility of, well, maybe there's goodness here. Maybe there's
just seeing a little boy grow up. That's what it is.
Yeah.
He's got every right to be here like any other child. Yet he might have been detected, and then it's a different conversation. It just makes me so sad for his community. That's all. It really does. I mean, I'm honest about it. You would not choose it. I wouldn't choose it for my child, but you do choose your child.
Yeah.
You see the 2 lines on the pregnancy stick. You are in love with that child from that start. You feel very lucky. And I think a diagnosis can just get in the way of so much stuff. So, my job as an advocate is just to keep on, keeping those doors open as much as we can.
So, what would you say to parents, a mother? I say parents because it may be a mother on her own, or it may be a mother with a partner. What would you say to anyone who has been told, okay, we've done the test, we've had the results, and your baby has Down syndrome or is very likely to be born with Down syndrome? What would you say to that?
Well, the first thing I would say is congratulations on having a baby. That word gets taken away immediately. There's no congratulations. It's a shame. You're having a baby. Congratulations. And your little baby will take your family, on a slightly different journey. But there's other things to see on that journey. There's a richness in that journey. It's not coloured in all the dark colours that you think it's going to be. And I would request those parents to research about it and read up about it and see what it's like. They've got a choice. Of course, they've got a choice. But to remember that Down syndrome is a very livable condition. There's never been a better time to be born with it. My son has incredible support that's getting him talking. He's now just started walking. No one's going to be bothered when he's 15 years old to go, well, when did you start walking? It's just,
no.
And as long as he can communicate, which, I do worry a little bit about, but I know he's going to get there. I'll never forget, someone told me, you will have a walking, talking child. That's what you want, isn't it? And you go, well, yeah. And like we've spoken about earlier, they do get generalised. Oh, they're such loving children. A lot. Well, they are. They are. They're very. Well, my son is very happily pleased and is very tactile and is very gentle. We have a lot of lying together at night just because I'm making the most of it, and soaking it all up before I have to divert my attention. He was just playing with my eyelashes, really gently. You just think, bless you. To be gentle. But we have all these wonderful, wonderful moments, and because it's not like I have no expectations of Theo, but I would say to these new parents that you do have to obviously shift your expectations, and when those expectations are nudged by your child, when I see a light go on or I take him outside and he does the sign for bird because he hears bird song. Or there's other stuff. When you see them put two and two together, you see that less, of course, and you see it delayed. But when you do see it, oh my God, it's like gold dust. And these things shine like they may not have done. I have a kid who feeds himself. And I know that doesn't mean much maybe to everyone else, but it means a lot to me. He feeds himself and he knows what he likes and he doesn't like, even though he can't necessarily tell me. I know he loves jelly. He goes crackers over that. And you just think, this is great. I've talked about it before, about it a bit like being in a waiting room in the sky, and everybody goes through the door and you're left. You think, how long am I going to wait for? And you wait and you wait and you wait. And then you get to go through the door. And actually, you being the last person feels different than if you were the first person. So there's lots of things that you can learn about yourself. New agey, I suppose, but he has changed me. He will change the life of this baby, which I do worry about. There's, this little guy will, take over Theo at some point and take on a bit of a role as a carer, whatever that's going to look like. But it means, someone said to me, it does mean that your son's not going to be a twat the second one. And I was like, yeah, he probably won't be, because he will have shaped very much like we are, and like, Theo's extended family, like his grandparents, they didn't know about it either. And they've learnt a bit of Makaton, and we've all been pleasantly surprised. We've all been on a journey with him, and it was a very bleak journey at the beginning. But the journey is actually really worth it. It really is.
So my last question to you is the same question that I ask every mama that I interview on the podcast. And it's particularly poignant, I think, when you are in a situation where you have a child who has a particular need, be it educational or physical or because of illness or emotional. Where do you get your mama fuel? How do you keep your tanks filled up in the middle of working? I also had a career in global PR for 15 years and still am in communications and part of my universe. And I know the demands of that world. And you have a child who has special needs and advocacy work that you want to do, and a relationship that you want to keep going, and maybe friends and family you want to see, and a new house that you've decided to completely redo because you've just moved in. Where in the middle of all that do you get your mama fuel?
Well, I've got to say, I bloody well hope I have some mama fuel in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be severely tested, because I haven't really done breastfeeding, too many sleepless nights. So I'm going to be asking myself that question, I suspect. Where do I get it from? Well, I suppose there's a source within myself. Being a mama opens up a part of you that you just weren't aware that you had before. You're out in the city having a drink, whatever it is. You're not that person that you're about to become. And there's a depth there that I think we all channel into, because it unlocks something in you. You see the two lines, you have the baby, it unravels things in you that you didn't know that you had. And obviously, I'm very lucky that I have a supportive partner, even though sometimes I think he thinks pregnancy makes me crackers, and he's like, we're never going to do this again. I'm hoping, but I'm getting on now. I think he's a very rational, down-to-earth person. We took the diagnosis very differently, actually. He just sort of got on with it. He's dyslexic himself, so he was just like, well, special needs isn't like a strange thing to me, where it was to me. So we're very different people, and I think that has helped. Obviously, friends and family, but I get it from Theo. I get it from child. I get it from every time he holds my hand or looks at me. I'm going to get emotional again, but I get it from him. Yeah, he's made me the mum I am, definitely.
Well, I am thankful to Theo for that, because thanks to Theo, we're connected, and I'm thrilled about that. And I am delighted that you found time less than 24 hours before giving birth again. I mean, talking about somebody who doesn't really have a lot of time in her schedule, it's the woman who's going to give birth in less than 24 hours. So
probably about now, I think. Yeah.
Well, there you go. So I wish you an easy, smooth, joyful, healthy.
Thank you.
Just normally,
that's what we get.
Normally complicated birth, because you have the birth and then you feel a bit after the C-section.
Yeah.
I hope that is the extent of the difficulty. I hope that your greatest challenge with this birth is that your baby wants milk.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I won't miss the anxiety, I have to say. So much anxiety when you've had an experience like that, but anxiety and gratitude, they sit together. And hopefully the anxiety will go once I get handed this little guy and he latches on and we latch on to a different reality, and it starts to merge and and then this kid is going to take us on another journey, and that's what it is. You need fuel for a journey, and you get it from somewhere, don't you?
You do, and just when you think you couldn't possibly have any more, you find a reserve somewhere, or someone does something lovely, or you read just the words that you need. And I'm sure that your words are often just those words for so many parents out there. So thank you for your advocacy. Thank you for taking the time and for speaking to me. And thank you for just being
the tears.
I know. We've had nursing, we've had tears. I've had dogs silently farting under my desk. There are all kinds of realities happening on the podcast, and I don't edit the podcast, in case anyone's ever wondered, because the conversation just goes as it goes, and that's, I think, part of it. It's an essential part for me of this podcast, is to just be real, and sometimes that's glorious, and sometimes
it's sniffly.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and I will let you know. I will look forward to hearing what tomorrow brings for you, and to know that all is well. And I will definitely, as people are listening to this podcast, we will already know how you're doing. So I will put that in the intro when it's time to publish. But thank you so much. And have fun tomorrow. Enjoy meeting the guy.
I'm going to, definitely. This is, reasons I wanted to do this podcast is this will be one of the last times I talk about Theo as a family of three. So I'm glad that it's sort of been recorded in history in a way.
Yeah, we've captured the moment. Well, I will let you know as soon as I know what day it is that we're going to share this. And thank you, Claire. Wishing you all the best for tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Lovely to talk to you, and thanks for having me on.
I loved that conversation and the obvious emotion that Claire was feeling at the time, getting ready to meet her little guy, hoping that this second birth was going to help heal some of the trauma around the first, and being excited about meeting little Freddie. So I hope that you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. I hope that it has opened your eyes, as it did mine, to what it's like to have a child with a different gift, a different chromosome, a difference in development, and what that can have as effects on the social life of the child and the families, and how easy it is for those who are a little different to be isolated. If you know anybody who is a little bit different, which, let's face it, really, we all are in varying degrees, reach out to them. Find some compassion, find some love, find some common points, and dig into those so that those people can be brought in. We can include everybody as much as possible so that everyone has a shared, beautiful, enriched experience, because my goodness, people who have Down syndrome are incredible, and their families are too. So I'm celebrating you, Claire, and your beautiful family of four, and anyone else who's listening. I hope that this conversation resonates with you, and that you remember about the self-love practice run that we are starting on the 17th of June. If you are listening to this before the 17th of June, or even any time between the 17th and the 22nd of June, write me a note. drop me a line, DM me, ann@mamafuel.me, or find me on Instagram or Facebook, and I will hook you up so that you can be part of that 5-day practice run. It's going to be awesome. It is going to fuel you up, and it's going to send you on the road to better self-love and self-care. I can't wait to join you and have you be part of the community. So come on in, get in touch, and I'll see you soon. That's it for this episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. To join the virtual village, go to www.mamafuel.me/Facebook. That's MAMAFUEL.me/Facebook. And be sure to say hi when you get there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little mama fuel, and let's face it, we all have times when we're running on fumes, I'd love you to share this episode and to rate it and leave a review. The algorithms work that way. The more reviews there are and the more sharing there is, the more mamas will be able to feel encouraged and supported with the conversations that you just listened to in MamaFuel. Every comment helps, and it's always a super delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.